All right, let's just dive right into it. We all have these really strong gut feelings about what's right and what's wrong. But what if those feelings aren't actually pointing to anything real? What if morality itself is just something we made up? We're about to tackle one of philosophy's biggest and honestly most unsettling questions. You know, this isn't a new debate. Shakespeare, through Hamlet, basically nailed the core of it centuries ago. Is a horrific act actually bad, like as a law of physics, or is it only bad because we all just sort of agree to call it that? So this is the fundamental question right here. Are moral values objective truths out there in the universe, like gravity, just waiting for us to discover them? Or are they subjective inventions, like the rules of baseball? The answer? Well, it changes pretty much everything.
Now, to be clear, we're not talking about specific rules like, is it wrong to steal? We're going a level deeper into what's called meta-ethics. This isn't about the rules of the game of morality, it's asking if the game itself is even real in the first place.
Okay, so this entire philosophical throwdown is fought on two main battlegrounds. The first is about reality. Are moral values real things out there in the world? That's the moral realists versus the moral anti-realists. The second is all about language. When we say stealing is wrong, are we stating a fact that can be true or false? Or are we just expressing a feeling, like saying stealing boo? That's cognitivism versus non-cognitivism. Let's see how this whole thing unfolds. Let's start with what probably feels most natural to all of us, moral realism. It's the common sense view that some things are just plain wrong, period. But, and here's the tricky part, how do you actually ground that wrongness in reality? The first real attempt to do this is called ethical naturalism. And the idea here is that goodness is just a natural property of the world, something we can observe and measure, kind of like heat or mass. So for instance, Aristotle said good is whatever causes human flourishing. For the utilitarians, good is simply whatever brings about the most pleasure. Both flourishing and pleasure are real, natural states you can observe in the world. Seems pretty simple, right? Well, not so fast, because here comes the 18th century philosopher David Hume, and he's about to drop a philosophical bombshell on this whole idea. Hume basically argues that you can't get to morality by using reason alone. He spots what he sees as a massive flaw in the naturalist's logic. And this is his famous is-ought gap. You can state a fact, an is statement, like, it is a fact that human nature seeks pleasure. But you can't just magically, logically jump to a moral command and ought, like, therefore we ought to maximize pleasure. Where did that ought come from? It doesn't logically follow. It's a huge leap. So if moral rules aren't products of reason, where do they come from? Hume's answer is the heart, not the head. Saying something is wrong isn't stating a fact about the world, you're just expressing how you feel about it. Okay, so that's a huge challenge to moral realism, a real body blow. But the realists aren't down for the count yet. The philosopher G.E. Moore comes up with a very clever and honestly a very strange way to save the whole idea. Moore essentially says, okay, Hume, you got me. You're right. Good isn't a natural property that we can see or measure. But instead of giving up on realism, he makes this incredible pivot. He asks, what if goodness is a real but non-natural property? This is a theory called Intuitionism. Think about the color yellow for a second. Can you define it? Not really. You just know it when you see it. Moore claims goodness is just like that. It's a simple, basic, indefinable property that we detect with some kind of special moral intuition. And for Moore, this means that any attempt to say goodness is pleasure is a mistake he calls the naturalistic fallacy. You're trying to define something unique and simple in terms of something else. It's like trying to define yellow by talking about light wavelengths. Sure, the wavelength might cause yellow, but it isn't the experience of yellow itself. So, problem solved? Moral realism is saved. We just have to believe in these strange, non-natural properties and some mysterious sixth sense that lets us see them. Well, for the philosopher J.L. Mackie, this so-called solution is actually way more unbelievable than the original problem. So Mackie unleashes what he calls his argument from queerness. And by queer, he just means profoundly strange. He says, metaphysically, objective values would be just too weird to exist. They'd be unlike anything else in the universe. And epistemologically, how in the world could we possibly know about them? What kind of faculty lets us perceive wrongness? And just listen to how Mackie puts it. For an act like murder to be objectively wrong, He says the universe itself would need a property of not-to-be-doneness, literally woven into its fabric. It's an incredibly strange, almost spooky idea when you think about it.
Mackie concludes these objective values are just too strange to actually exist. But then he notices that we all talk and act as if they're real. We argue about them constantly. So if they don't exist, but we believe they do, what does that make our beliefs?
This leads to his absolutely mind-bending conclusion, error theory. He says, okay, we talk as if objective values are real, but they aren't. So what happens when you try to state a fact about something that doesn't actually exist? The statement is false. The result? Every single moral statement ever made, genocide is evil, kindness is good, is, technically speaking, false, an error.
That is a deeply unsettling conclusion to land on. If the claim genocide is evil is fundamentally a false statement, what are the consequences of that? What does that mean for us as a society?
And this quote from the philosopher Philippa Foot just perfectly captures that profound gut-level resistance to the idea. I mean, can we really look at the horror of the Holocaust and say that any claim about its evil is just a feeling, or worse, a factual error? It just feels deeply, fundamentally wrong.
And this gut feeling points to two massive problems for anti-realism. First, the threat of nihilism. If nothing is truly objectively wrong, then why not be evil? What's to stop you? And second, the problem of moral progress. We all like to think that abolishing slavery was progress, that society got better. But how can you even say that if there's no objective standard of better to measure it against?
And so we're left with this really stark choice. Do we put our faith in these queer, unexplainable objective values? Or do we accept that our entire moral framework might just be one giant systematic error? Is our belief in right and wrong a necessary fiction that holds society together? Or is it a delusion we need to overcome?